Let's get to the heart of your campaign. The universal basic income, the freedom dividend, as you call it. You say it tested better with Republicans.
With the word freedom in it, yes.
Did you do, what is that? You did actual, test, focus groups?
Yeah. Well, it was market sampling and online. So we tested a bunch of names. Social Security for all, universal basic income, obviously. Opportunity dividend, prosperity dividend, freedom dividend was the clear winner.
It's a beautiful American phrase. I could see the flag waving in the wind and the bald eagle screaming the freedom dividend.
Yeah, who could be against the freedom dividend?
Yeah,
You'd have to be some kind of jerk.
So, can you explain what universal basic income is for those people who don't know? Yeah.
Universal basic income is a policy where everyone in a society, in this case every U.S. citizen, gets a certain amount of money to meet your basic needs, no questions asked. So my proposal of freedom dividend would be $1,000 a month in the hands of every American adult starting at age 18 until the day you die, $12,000 a year. And this seems dramatic, but this has actually been proposed and almost passed in America any number of times over the years. Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King was fighting for it 1967 when he was assassinated in 1968. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists endorsed it in the 70s. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives and the Congress twice in 71, so it came this close to being law. Yeah.
Wow. What was the amount they were prepared to give out then?
It was about $12,000 a head.
Wow.
Yeah. And they even ran studies. If you can imagine a government that was so functional that they actually just started giving money to Americans just to see what would happen. The U.S. government did that in the 60s. They started giving people money and be like, oh, what's going on? And the data was very, very promising.
They did that?
Yeah, they did that.
What'd they do?
They picked random groups of Americans in New Jersey and Colorado and other parts of the country to start giving them cash and then follow them around to see what happened.
Really?
That's so interesting.
Yeah, can you
Did
imagine
other
a functional
Americans know
government
about
doing
that?
Yeah. I mean, this was...
It's like a lottery?
This was all the rage in the sense that everyone thought this was a good idea. Again, 1,000 economists signed a study saying this would be great for America if we just guaranteed a certain amount of money for every American. We just passed Social Security. We just passed Medicare. And so the American people were looking around being like, hey, maybe we can do some other great stuff. And Martin Luther King was saying, we should do this. And then it was endorsed by a lot of people. And then it passed the U.S. House of Representatives. So during that time, Congress, when they were looking to pass it, they said, well, we should just give people money to see what happens.
And you said the results were good.
The results were really good.
So what happened?
So it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice, and then it got stalled in the Senate because Democrats in the Senate wanted an even higher income threshold. I shit you not. And someone who worked in Democratic politics at that time said it was the biggest mistake we ever made. We should just sign that.
Oh my God.
And then the moment was lost, and then Nixon gets impeached, and then the pendulum swings. You wind up with Reagan, and then the whole moment was lost. But it just gives you a sense of how mainstream this idea was. How it came this close to being law. It became a law in Alaska, and not that long afterwards in the early '80s. And so it's not like a far out idea, and that's one of the things that frustrates me is that now, I'm like the quote unquote futurist presidential candidate being like, oh, crazy $1,000 a month. It's like, this was mainstream American political wisdom in the 60s and 70s. What the hell happened to us where now we think it's nuts? It's like,
well, now we need it even more than we did then, right?
Yes. Now we actually need it.
Now it's a necessity.
And when you start thinking about it for a minute, it becomes common sense. But it gets caricatured in various ways, even though it actually, again, is a deeply American and mainstream idea. And now, Barack Obama came out and said we should talk about it. Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and others are we should totally do it. It's actually, in many ways, this conversation is definitely overdue. In my opinion, this should have been passed years ago.
Certainly an exciting time where your campaign is growing. It's resonating. I mean, what an exciting thing it would be for the United States.
Well, yeah, anyone watching this or listening to it, you can become part of the Yang Gang. It's a very cheap gang to join.
Yeah,
it's very wholesome.
Gang around.
The cheapest gang around. If you gave $27, you'd be an above average member of the gang.
Think of it as an investment.
Yeah.
You get $1,000
a month
a month
for life.
Yeah.
You know, what's the return on $27 then? I can do the math. I'm very good at math. No, I can't do that math.
That's too complicated.
It's very high. Very,
How would
very,
you
very
get
high.
it? You just get a wire transfer every month to
It's
your bank?
opt-in. You sign in. You give them the way you want the money. Direct deposit into your
Check,
account
direct
is
deposit,
preferable.
whatever. What about someone who's making a lot of money? Is it a tax deduction, or it's money that you put in the account?
So it comes in your account, and you don't pay tax on it, but you pay money on your other income, just
So
as
you
it
don't.
would be.
Okay. How'd you get interested in UBI? When was there a moment where you're like, this is the solution? I mean,
So I ran this nonprofit that I had started, Venture for America, that our job was to create American jobs. So we helped create about 3,000 American jobs over 7 years, and I got a bunch of medals and awards, and like everyone being like, "Oh, yay!" Like, well done. So during that time, I was obviously very interested in jobs and the future of work. So I would read various books about the future of work, and some of the books about the future of work were like, "Hey, guess what? Robots are coming, and we should really start looking into what that's going to mean."
future of work is there's no work.
Yeah. And so a lot of them were saying we should do a universal basic income. And then when I read these books, I said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. We should totally do that." and then in 2015, I read another book called Raising the Floor by a guy named Andy Stern, who used to run the biggest labor union in the U.S. And he said the future of labor is no labor, we're screwed, and we should move to a dividend. And so I read that and I was like, wow, it's not just the tech guys, it's the labor leader saying we need to do this. So I became convinced at that point and became very passionate about it during that period.
So I think this is a misconception that a lot of people have, or at least an opinion. The intention of universal basic income is not to enable people not to work.
Yeah,
is it?
exactly. Knock on wood.
Right.
That's right.
Right. I mean, because $1,000 a month, first of all, not enough money for most people. And second of all, I think that a lot of people derive purpose in their life from their work. So, in 50 years when there's no jobs, or let's say 10 years, someone can't find a job, they're getting $1,000 a month. What do you do when that's not enough?
So first, could not agree more that one of the biggest misconceptions is that universal basic income or the freedom dividend is somehow going to reduce work. Because number one, it recognizes a lot of the work that we're already doing that does not get recognized. And it would be an enormous catalyst to entrepreneurship, arts, creativity, nurturing, caregiving, all these things we kind of want to do that the market says it's not worth enough for you to make a living at it, so don't do it. So it would create and recognize and reward a lot of the work that we're trying to do is number one. Number two, if you imagine what $12,000 a year would mean in a town of, let's call it 100,000 adults, you're talking about another $12 million like a month that's coming through that town. And so that doesn't just help the individuals, that supercharges the local businesses, it supercharges the local nonprofits, it supercharges the volunteer organizations. And so when you say what do the jobs of the future look like, it could be that 20 years from now, it's very normal to work in a job that just helps make other people stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, helps clean our environment. Things that right now there's no market demand for. There could actually be massive opportunities in. The problem right now is that, again, we're following capital efficiency and it says these things are worth zero.
Right.
So the big change we have to make is if we change the measurements and say these things are actually worth like a lot,
Yeah.
then that's
All of
the
a sudden, those are good jobs to have.
Yeah.
right. It's just right now those are not good jobs to have because
Because there's no money.
yeah, they pay shitty and like, no one respects you. And it's like, if you do that, just be like, so that's like the evolution we have to make. And it's more achievable than people think. I mean, the first step's just get some money into people's hands. And the great thing is you put money into people's hands, that's going to supercharge the kind of work that people want to do because people would choose to then start a new organization, start businesses, donate to their local org.
Such an interesting idea, too. And I mean, there's such a disparity of wealth, not just with the Jeffs of the world, but between Kansas and Los Angeles, $1,000 is going to help lift them up a lot more than it is people in Los Angeles, and I think among citizens of the United States would make a big difference in equality of wealth as well.
It really would. The disparities between different parts of the country are so vast.
Yeah.
Where you travel around and
It's a different world.
Yeah, we're a lot of little countries, or a lot of different countries in one country.
Yeah.
And that was one of my experiences with Venture for America, going to many of these regions I had not been to. You drive, an hour out of Birmingham or something like that, like you find yourself in like a different sort of environment.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that too. But I'm wondering, we've talked about the VAT tax. Does that pay for the whole thing? Would this increase taxes on middle or lower class people?
It increases the purchasing power of 94% of Americans. You're like, one of the jokes is like, why did the bank robber rob the bank? Because that's where the money is. We got to go to where the money is, and the money's not in like the hands of like the average workaday American.
So,
but the great thing is, here are the other ways we get the money. So number one, get a slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad. Does that cover the whole thing? No. But here's the magic. Number two, money in our hands ends up growing our economy by 10 to 12%, and we get $400 billion in new tax revenue because of all the additional money is getting spent. Number three, if you get the boot off of Americans' throats, you end up making us healthier, better educated, mentally healthier. And one study said that just alleviating gross poverty would increase our GDP by $700 billion just based on better education and health outcomes. And that's it. Like, not more businesses started, none of that stuff. It's just health and education. And then number four, we'd save hundreds of billions on things like incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room healthcare.
Right.
We're spending over $1 trillion on that stuff now.
that's true.
Yeah.
And there was a corrections officer in New Hampshire who said to me flat out, he said, we should pay people to stay out of jail.
That's what you want to do.
Because he sees that when they're in jail, we spend so much
Yeah.
money. This is a prison guard making this case to me. So if he sees it, we try and say like, oh, we're saving money by not spending money on ourselves. We just end up spending the money in more expensive and dark and punitive ways anyway.
Yeah.
So you invested in ourselves in the trickle-up economy, then you end up saving yourself tons of money.
So in short, you are not raising taxes on middle and lower classmen.
Oh, no. The goal is to get more purchasing power into our hands. Because right now, the middle class is getting eroded very, very quickly. And that's not where the money is. Then we got to go where the money is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so who would be eligible? I know you say anyone over 18 until the day they die. For example, would legal residents like my wife be eligible? Would undocumented residents be eligible? Illegal immigrants, guest workers?
So it is only citizens, but it's one reason why having you become a citizen would be awesome. And then you got to become a citizen. And then,
Oh, Yang Gang.
yeah. I'm for a path to citizenship for people who are here and undocumented. I'm certainly for a path to make it easier for people who want to live and work here to stay here. I'm the son of immigrants myself.
Right.
I know that immigrants are very positive for this country socially, economically. But the dividend would kick in after you become a citizen.
Okay.
So it's a very powerful incentive to
Yeah.
go through all the rigmarole that you're probably dealing with right now.
Yeah.
What about citizens abroad?
That is such an interesting question. So the reality is that the economic benefits become exponentially higher if the money gets spent within the country itself, rather than having a large number of citizens who, let's say, moves to another part of the world and then spend the money there. So you're a citizen, you get the dividend forever, but there's like a certain time frame after which, like, if you live abroad for a certain number of months, then the dividend gets held for you for when you come back to the country.
Interesting. So you don't lose it, it just accrues.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is there any prevention? Let's say I want to go live in Thailand because it's cheap. I come back in 3 years, I get all my dividends, and then I bounce back to Thailand.
yeah. So that's like the thing we're trying to avoid, is that then, but then if you bounce back to Thailand, then the dividend would start accruing again. So the goal is to make it so that the vast majority of the money gets spent here.
Yeah. Would there be disqualifying factors? Felons, for example, people in prison?
if we're spending the money on your incarceration, then you don't receive the dividend. The benefit,
If you're in jail,
yeah.
you don't get the money.
But the great thing then is you come out, it's a very powerful incentive for you to stay out.
So felons who have served their time get the dividend.
When they come out,
Yeah.
they start getting
out.
it. And also does not accrue during that time.
Does not accrue.
Right. So, but then if you come out, then everyone's excited to see you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like $1,000. Imagine like coming out of prison and everyone's like psyched to have you because you're coming with a dividend. Whereas right now you come back and you have very unclear prospects.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would a homeless person receive this money?
Yeah, I just had a conversation with people about this. Obviously, the homeless person's not in a position to have a bank account and sign up and get the money, but it creates an enormous incentive for us to help that person get on their feet. Because right now, what's the economic incentive to help that homeless person?
Nothing.
Zero in many cases. So imagine if you were a city agency or a nonprofit and you said, hey, every person I help, there's $1,000 a month in it for them, and then I'm going to get some of that. And then all of a sudden, you have much more in the way of resources to help people who are homeless.
Because Los Angeles is in the midst of a homeless crisis. I wonder if something like this would make such a big difference in homelessness, because it incentivizes them to get off the streets, and it gives them an option to live with dignity.
Yes, because right now the problem is that, again, if you fall through the cracks and you're homeless, like our incentives to help you are very low. It's just if you become a nuisance. And even then it falls to our public agencies and nonprofits. And we know those are vastly under-resourced. And so this would be a game changer for the level of incentives necessary to help get these homeless people off the street, and then maybe even have low-cost housing available for people over time. Because if you have $1,000 a month, we're able to get a roof over your head in many, many cases.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the evolution of our economy to actually work for us. And when I say us, I don't mean like people who are just, doing well. I mean the people who are struggling, or substance abuse, have problems that are putting them out in the street.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any unforeseen consequences of the freedom dividend. For example, if you're putting $1,000 in everyone's hands, how, for example, does that affect the housing market? Is there a situation where the inflation ends up moving that money back into the hands of the wealthy?
Rent prices will go up because they know you have another $1,000
all of a
to spend.
sudden when the people whose motivation is to make as much money as possible know that everyone's walking around with an extra $1,000 in their hand, what are the things that we need the most in this world? Medicine, healthcare, housing, food.
And if you look at it, those are three of the biggest sources of inflation in our economy: is housing, education, healthcare, because those markets don't actually function competitively or dynamically.
Right. So how do we prevent these people from sucking up all that extra money and just becoming richer?
So I have separate plans to address inflation in healthcare and education, because those are their own animals. Housing is the stickiest because a lot of it is based upon local zoning regs and NIMBYism. And so even if I'm the president, I can't be like, hey, guess what? We're going to wipe out your zoning regs. That's not cool. But I will say that if you have $1,000 a month in your hands, it makes it so that if a landlord tries to really gouge you or stick it to you, that you're going to be able to be much more portable. And then if there are 3 of you or 4 of you, be like, hey, instead of letting this landlord stick it to us, the 4 of us are getting $4,000 a month. Let's buy that piece of crap over there and turn it around. And because the income's portable, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay within 30 miles of a particular place of employment or anything like that. So it actually makes it much more fluid and dynamic again. Now, to the extent that we can control it, we should try and curb the ability of municipalities to not have affordable housing, because again, everything is following the dollar in the society. So if I have a choice between building a fancy high-rise for yuppies or affordable housing, I'm going to do the former. Right. So to the extent that we can push incentives towards creating more diverse affordable housing options, that's the direction we have to go. But it is going to be harder to stick it to people if they have portable income that goes with them everywhere.